and welcome to MVP, the Master's Voice podcast from Mediabrief.com. I'm your host and friend Pavan Chawla, and with me today is Pushkar Gokhale, business head, Godrej Security Solutions, a strong brand with offerings that are extremely relevant, particularly in today's day and age. Pushkar, welcome to the episode.
Yeah, hi, good evening, Pavan, and good evening, everyone.
Thank you very much indeed, Pushkar, for your time. And thanks also to Brinda Mehta of AdFactors PR and Yashodhara of the Copcom team for having made this interaction possible. You know, as I look out of Pushkar's window when I walked in, it's a beautiful overcast afternoon now, sort of pushing evening at the verdant Godrej complex at Vikhroli in Mumbai. I must tell my listeners that when I walked in, he said, "This is a view you cannot buy." So Pushkar is blessed to be here. And thanks for inviting me over, Pushkar. But before I begin our episode, allow me to briefly introduce you to my listeners. Yeah. So, by your leave, here goes. Pushkar Gokhale, business head, Godrej Security Solutions, is a result-oriented, decisive leader with proven success that includes a strong track record of increasing sales and growing the bottom line while spearheading operational improvements to drive productivity and cost reduction to excel in the VUCA world. 15 of his 29 years in corporate life have been in the field of international business, a space in which he has hands-on experience in establishing international business strategies for various organizations and has also set up and successfully managed 2 international offices. Pushkar has traveled extensively to more than 40 countries across the globe. Pushkar leads a motivated team offering peace of mind to a broad spectrum of stakeholders. And he has valuable and wide exposure to highly diverse business practices in a multicultural environment. So that's Pushkar Gokhale, business head at Godrej Security Solutions, a business of Godrej and Boyce, the flagship company of the Godrej Group. So Pushkar, once again, welcome to the Master's Voice podcast from Mediabrief.com. Let's get on to the business end of our conversation, Pushkar. It's something I've been really looking forward to. 29 years of rich and varied experience, Pushkar. Tell me about your journey with Godrej first.
So, I think the journey with Godrej, it's been really fulfilling. You're looking at something beyond 2 decades. And, I still remember starting off young, starting off at a junior level and, growing within the company, growing within the ranks and, taking initiative, getting an opportunity to set up not just 1 but 2 international offices and then of course running them successfully. Wow. It's been really a satisfying kind of experience. And of course, when I set up the entire operations and started heading the operations, it was about grooming the team because we had to get in people from India, groom them to suit the international environment in Middle East, North Africa. And it was such a great experience to, mold the team members, because it's something which is beyond the top line, bottom line. Of course, that's always there. But when you see your team members grow within the organization or, even if some of them have moved out, they're still doing well, it's a great feeling of satisfaction. And I think this is what the Godrej Group has really given me. It's been a lot of independence. And I think they have recognized the kind of initiative I have taken and always backed me up, always supported me. And today when I look back, after completing those 6 years of stint in Middle East, coming back, and taking a role in the Security Solutions division, that was I think in 2008. And then from there growing and, growing the business and now of course being the head of this SBU.
Lovely. So tell me, you came into Godrej, you got about 29, pushing 30 years of experience, corporate experience. When did your entry into Godrej, which year in the timeline of that 29 years?
That was in the year 2000. So now, of course, the 23rd year for me.
Amazing. And what I truly like is the inclusivity. I see a mini India over here in your office. And, in terms of people, names, looks, and it's really heartwarming, I must tell you that. And now let's speak about Godrej Security Solutions, which, as I said a while back, is a strong brand with offerings that are extremely relevant, particularly in today's day and age. First, Pushkar, give me your overview of the security sector in terms of how it has grown and the potential that it has? A bird's eye view, back of the envelope.
I think security industry as such, is highly fragmented.
Right.
So it's going to be very difficult, by any stretch of imagination. I think if I were to peg it, especially, looking at the enormous size of India, I think it won't be less than, say, 20,000 crores. That's probably the least I could say. And if you look at the kind of growth rates, if at all one has to estimate, that will be to the tune of, say, 10 to 12%. Because security is an inherent need, and crime rates are going up. The difference between the haves and have-not is going up. So you will find that, these are the things which are happening, which are changing the entire gamut of security very differently. And that's where the industry is growing. And I believe that this will keep growing that way.
Thank you. Yeah. And now, Pushkar, the expert's bird's eye view. Obviously, you're the expert of the space of security solutions. In fact, of security in society and around us. What are the biggest threat areas for security today, for people? Whether it's individuals or an enterprise. I mean, years ago, the wonderful Godrej brass padlock was the hallmark of the best security. And I remember my parents saving to buy one. And it was like amazing. And it still is across the country, but the security threats of today have a much bigger spectrum, across property, life, against the elements and on the cyberspace and more. So while the world is your oyster, and it's very sad because, there is so much of crime that's going up, etc., and people need security. But what I'm happy about and what we should be glad about is that there are motivated, capable, and really able entities that provide security solutions like Godrej Security Solutions. So what are the areas, what are the main threat areas on security that everybody has to watch out for, whether they are in an enterprise or at home or, wherever?
So I will take this question and address it differently for the two different segments.
Okay.
So one is more about the enterprises,
Okay.
where the element of risk is very, very different than what one would face typically at home. And of course, there's one more aspect of security is about securing our nation. So that's the third and most important element.
Right.
So if you look at how the enterprises are actually at risk, definitely the risk is growing, in terms of addressing fire as one of the areas. Because if you see the number of fire incidents which are happening today, they are rampant. And we are seeing that there is a lack of awareness, when it comes to the subject or topic of fire. So this is one area. The second area is, of course, in terms of unauthorized access into the premises, where, one could actually, so for example, the unauthorized access could lead to burglaries in case of banks. And the same thing if you look at IT companies, there it's not about the valuables or the gold or cash, but it is more about data protection.
Right.
So I think every element of the society is exposed to different types of security risks. That's the enterprise part. Coming to the homes, again, fire has always been an issue, and now furthermore, because you see high-rise buildings becoming a very common thing today, and that's where I think fire hazards are really, really scary. The other area, of course, is more about home thefts, house thefts and things like that. That is something which is also rampantly on the rise.
Sometimes it's very sad, but there is domestic violence, or there is some sexual harassment of wards, or it's very sad, but then I think they all need a security blanket.
Absolutely, and these are, of course, the social drivers which actually come into play when you look at these elements.
Right. And what has been your strategy now that we know what are the main security threat areas that you've told us about, Pushkar? What is your strategy? What has been your strategy in identifying and planning areas and solutions for your business from GSS to the nation?
So Pavan, see, there are three elements of our strategy, when it comes to approach to the customers. So one of those being, very clearly as to what is it that we want to offer. And that's something which is the core piece for us. So, for example, one of the most important enterprises which are there for us is the BFSI segment, the jewelers segment, some of the corporates. So one of the things which we have believed in is user insight based innovation. So we work very closely with all these entities, try to understand what are their stated as well as implied needs, and then we work out products and solutions to meet these needs, which is about mitigating the security risks. Many a times it so happens that we actually co-create solutions along with our customers.
Customized.
Yes, customized solutions, co-creation of solutions is what we believe in. Because ultimately it is about offering something which the customer wants. And that is the most important part of our strategy. Even if when it comes to homes, we have actually tried to understand with a lot of research as to what exactly is required, and then dovetailed our products, our solutions around the need of the customer. So that is the first piece of our strategy. The second piece, I'll just give you an example. We are big time into home lockers, home safes, and this is a category which is quite nascent, and it's something which is more about a discretionary category, highly underpenetrated. And many a times you will find, and this is what we have seen and got to understand from customers, is that they will say, "Arey nahi, home lockers, nahi, it won't happen to me."
Yeah.
So this is the biggest change which we want to bring about. "Arey ye mujhe nahi hoga, mere saath nahi hoga." So this is where there's a lot of work which when we go to market and when we actually are finalizing or doing our strategy around how to reach out to customers, this is one very, very important aspect.
Right.
So of course now there are a lot of social media platforms. One can go online and do all these kind of awareness sessions whereby just to create that particular bit. But we still see that there is an inherent inertia when it comes to really taking the decision. So one of the other elements of our strategy is go to market, identifying the target group, basically deciding what should be our strategy to create that awareness, to create a pull. So that's the second element. And third most important part, and where I believe stands our highest or the most important pillar, is about the back end. Because it is not just about selling a product, it's also about after sales. And that piece is something which we have worked out, and I can right now say with a lot of confidence that I don't see any other player in the industry having the kind of wherewithal to even come close to what we offer as a service backup.
Tell me more about the service backup. Give me some example.
Yeah. So Pavan, I'll tell you, I'm sure that you travel internationally quite a lot. Now, just imagine that you have a home locker, and which is fitted into your wardrobe, and you kept your passport inside, and you got to catch a flight early in the morning, and suddenly you realize you have forgotten your password, or you just your keys are lost. So how do you open the locker in time? Or for that matter, just imagine there is a wedding in your family, and all the jewelry of your wife or your family members, it's there inside, and they forget the password, or the keys are lost, and you are in a rush. So that is where the service backup actually plays a vital role.
Wow.
So we have created systems and processes which will enable us, and not just enable us, but enable first the customer easily reach out to us. And then, of course, within no time, we will ensure that we help the customer out when he's really grappling and he's running out of oxygen for so if I were to say that. But this is the biggest advantage which one gets when working with an entity like us, who's really created these systems and processes and a fantastic network.
So you have a back end which may have not 2, may have 10-factor authorization before they open somebody's safe remotely. Is that what they do?
No, we have a network, a very strong network of authorized service providers across the country. And the moment you give a call to our call center, it's a 24/7 call center.
Right.
Immediately, the call will go based on the PIN code it'll go to the identified service provider and he'll reach you in no time. So that's what we do. And it's a pan-India kind of network which we have. And this is just possible because we have worked on it to create this kind of infrastructure. And the span of the country like India, it's not easy, getting into interiors. So I would say that this is the biggest USP which we have, as compared, of course, good products, studying what the market needs, all those things are definitely hygiene. And I think you might be surprised or pleasantly surprised to hear to what I'm going to tell you, that the same home lockers category, which we are working on developing it. Today we have more than 80% market share in India.
That's really wonderful, really. So obviously it's Godrej, it's 125 years. In any case, the entire entity, the mother brand, has a footprint on pin codes that is perhaps peerless, perhaps not matched by anyone. But tell me, what is the kind of reach in terms of physical presence or ability or demonstrated servicing of customers across how many thousand pin codes in India?
That will be a bit difficult to say, but I can tell you we have our own offices, our own Godrej and Boyce offices in all the states.
Right, yeah.
So more than 20 offices of our own, which basically, helps us to create this kind of network across. Otherwise, you just can't do it. Sitting in Mumbai, it won't be possible for me to, get into the interiors in the fashion which we have done, thanks to the kind of our own offices which we have in every state of the country.
Just tell me, what are the 3 or 4 important buckets in which your services fall?
So one of the buckets is obviously about the BFSI segment,
right? Okay.
Where I'm sure that you would have a locker in the bank. So that locker is actually manufactured by us. The locker is protected by us, with a strong room door. Then if at all someone is going and taking a home loan or a gold loan, he would basically have his jewelry given to the bank as a collateral. So we have solutions to protect those, ornaments.
Hypothecated things.
Yes. And not just that. See, what happens is, especially when it comes to gold loans, today that is becoming a very, very prominent space. And wherein, say, I'll just give you an example again. It helps. So, Pavan, just imagine a farmer, there is this agricultural gold loan, which is right now being facilitated by the government of India, where there is a subvention scheme also going on. So, where the farmers get a benefit of 3%. So, just imagine that a farmer goes and, basically gives his jewelry and takes a loan, say about 3 lakh rupees loan. The jewelry which he actually gives to the bank is something which could be very close to his heart. It is not just about 2.5-3 lakh rupees, but it is also about sentiments, because it could be his grandmothers or his paradadis
or his wives.
Or his wives. Yeah. So there is a sentiment attached, and that's the reason why it is important to protect it. So what we have done is we have actually created solutions to ensure that the gold pouches are protected. So we worked very closely with the banks and the non-banking finance companies to develop these kind of solutions. The second is about corporates. So when it comes to corporates, it's about access control. So it's not just about the pedestrian access, it is also about vehicular access. So we have solutions which take care of the pedestrian access, wherein you have multiple layers of security. So right from a fence to different kind of scanners, different kinds of barriers. And then when it comes to vehicles, we also have under vehicle surveillance systems, which are also a big thing.
Correct. Now let's come to which markets, which geographies do you see as the bigger growth spaces in India?
Obviously, one of the top of mind things are the metros, certainly. All the metros, where of course the population density, the crime rates, the number of people who are into the high income bracket, that's obviously there. High density of corporates, offices, which is there. But The next in line, I think, is the tier 2 towns, which also are growing. The economies in those pockets are also, growing quite well. And they would also eventually be under threat. So these are typically the areas which we are now focusing on. And I think what happens is, because we have our own presence in, all the states of the country, we are able to really understand and be there, rolling out our strategies and plans and products, distribution, after sales, so that's something which we are working on.
Yeah, I guess the whole country is grist to your solutions mill because, whether it's tier 4 or 3 or 2 or 1, the threats to security are the same. Okay. How do you reach out to your most important potential client, stakeholders and TGs? How do you market GSS across the country?
So one of the elements is, of course, reaching out through the social platforms or the online channels. That, of course, is one part of it. But the biggest, I would say, the element of our strategy to reach out is about our channel partners. We have actually created a fantastic ecosystem of channel partners across the country. And they are our, I would say, the feet on street when it comes to, reaching out to a country like India. And of course, one of the things which we do is proper due diligence of these channel partners, ensuring, that they are trained regularly. There's a proper structured training calendar. And because these are guys who are as good as our team members.
Because they obviously get their commissions. I think you're talking about points of sale.
These are channel partners who will also go and solicit business for us. So this is not just about the outlets.
Right.
This is about the partners who will basically meet customers, who will solicit for business, generate leads.
So these are employees?
No. Channel partners, in a simpler word, would be our dealers and distributors.
Okay.
So that's a very, very important piece for us. And Pavan, let me tell you, and this is something which, I'm proud to share with you, that most of our, and the reason why I call them channel partners, and I don't call them dealers, is because they have been with us for generations together.
Wow.
This is one of our values, which actually has resulted in the fact that it's not just, that someone had started yesterday. It's like the third generation who's a dealer with us. And now they are talking about the fourth one taking over, and having that kind of association with us. So, and that's the reason why I always believe that they are a very, very important element when it comes to reaching out to customers, in terms of distributing our products, generating business, generating leads. And if you see the products like the institutional products especially, they are very heavy. You talk about, a safe which could be, to the tune of 1.5 tons or 2.5 tons.
Wow.
A strong room door could be, something like 3 tons.
Wow.
So you need people who are specially trained to handle, these kind of heavy products and ensure that there are no safety hazards, no accidents. And that's where the expertise of, the channel partners comes into play, who are there with us for such a long time. And we've nurtured them,
Lovely. So, Pushkar, your services from GSS, Godrej Security Solutions, they seem to be mostly enterprise level. So, will you also diversify into helping really small and individual setups and units also, or are you also doing it right now?
No, we are doing that. So when it comes to a small office, we do have products which would basically address their needs. So, you're talking about products like the CCTV elements, or for that matter, access control, or, face recognition systems. A small time office also can basically avail that need. And of course, one more thing which I want to share here is post-COVID.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's one area which I thought I must share with you.
Yeah, what are your strategies and learnings rather pre-COVID, and what you observed during COVID? And God bless you for saying post-COVID. So let's all assume and pray that your words come true and COVID is now history. But post-COVID, what are your strategies and your views going ahead?
I'll tell you, see, one of the things which we were doing erstwhile, prior to the pandemic striking us, was about particular framework, which we called it as a 5D framework.
Okay.
When if I were to elaborate the 5D framework, it talks about essentially deter, detect, deny, delay, and defend.
Deter, detect, deny, delay, defend. This was for any inimical look at you.
Absolutely. So when we used to look at designing a product or a solution, we used to look at it from the lens of these 5Ds, because that gives you a very comprehensive and holistic view of looking at security. Post the pandemic striking us, one of the things which we did was to see how we could expand this 5D beyond just the fundamentals and look at health security. So what we coined that as 3S.
Right. 5D was really very interesting. And the deter actually tells you how to be preventive and not allow something to happen. Now tell me the 3S's. I'm very curious.
So earlier, as I said, it was about the 5Ds of security.
Right.
And now post the pandemic striking us, it was about adding the health security element and adding the 3S framework. So 3S is about sanitization, social distancing, and scanning for temperature and mask.
Oh, lovely. That I think every individual, whether they're at home or in one big enterprise or wherever in between, should be doing. How do you enable that?
So what we have done is we have superimposed the 5D concept and added that 3S element to it. So for example, a very, very simple example, I think you would have gone to a number of malls and public places. You would have seen that door frame metal detector. So what we have done is we have actually come up with an innovative solution. We have incorporated a temperature sensor in the door frame metal detector.
Wow.
So the moment you are scanned for any kind of heavy metal, in case you're carrying it, at that same time, you would be actually checked for whether your temperature is below the threshold or not.
Okay.
So these are the kind of small things. I give you one more example. You would have seen the flap barriers. You go to an airport. Nowadays, you will see those flap barriers or flap gates. So what we have done is we have actually integrated a face recognition system module with that. So with the moment you stand in front of the face recognition module, it will tell your temperature. So in case your temperature is higher than what is the threshold, the flap barrier will not open. If you are not wearing a mask, it will tell you that wear a mask. So, these are the kind of things which we have done. So earlier it was just about a barrier not allowing you to get in. Now it is about the barrier telling you follow the 3S principle as well. In fact, we have also integrated in some places a sanitization equipment, which will be a dispenser, an automated dispenser. The moment you take your hands below that, it will dispense, and only then will the flap barrier open. So, these are the kind of innovations which we have been working on post the pandemic.
So, in fact, my next question was, you've already given me an overview about the security sector and, business in India. Any specific trends I wanted to ask you that you anticipate in the years to come?
Yeah, so see, when I look at security and the future of security, I think it's all going to be about monitoring and tracking. Because if you look at our psyche, and especially post the past 2.5 years, where people were at home and, stuck at home, now we are seeing that the anxiety levels have suddenly shot up, because we keep discussing with a lot of people, and especially when it comes to small kids at home or old parents at home, husband and wife both are working, they continuously, their mind is at home, thinking about them. So I think if at all one has to address this concern, one needs to look at how does one monitor what's happening there, and how does one track, whether something is not going wrong, and how does one really act if at all there is a problem. So I think there is a huge trend which we are seeing in terms of demand for gadgets which would basically work on monitoring and tracking.
And would give the big value that you actually promised to give, which is you said to me before we started recording, which is peace of mind.
Yeah.
Right. How does being a part for you, Pushkar, of the wonderful Godrej family, how does it help your business and you? Tell me a little bit, something you really like and cherish and respect from across the 125 years journey for Godrej, what you must have heard of or experienced, and its core values. So I asked you a broad question. Tell me what you think.
So when I look at this 125 years of journey for Godrej, I would say that this is not something which is more of a standalone thing for the company. Because if you look at it, it's pre-independence and it is post-independence as well. So it is about the nation as such. And whatever has been my experience working for Godrej, I think when it comes to building the capability of India, capability of the nation, Godrej has always been there. So you could look at, say, an ISRO, wanting to develop a satellite, or you look at Ministry of Defense or the Armed Forces, where you really have to design or develop ammunition. So when it comes to all this, I think we are always there. So that is, I think, one of the biggest things which I have experienced working for Godrej. And I think this is all stemming from the fact that today we talk about Atmanirbharta, Atmanirbhar Bharat and things like that. But I think this was a value which was a part of Godrej for the past 125 years. Because when you look at the inception, when we started manufacturing locks or manufacturing soaps, for that matter, and then diversified into so many products, it was always about making things for India. Or it could be the first ballot box which was made by us. So I think the spirit of building the nation has always been there.
Right, absolutely. In fact, what I also really like is, I'm seeing the values behind you on the wall, and it says that it's, integrity, trust, respect, customer centricity, entrepreneurship, and environment stewardship. Any CSR initiatives that you at GSS are doing? Ultimately, the entire group is purpose driven, but anything specific that you all do?
No, so I would definitely like to talk about the ESG initiative, because I think that is the talk of the town today. But if I were to just tell you, Pavan, that ESG is not a new thing for us. We have been actually doing that for past so many decades. So, it could be about environment stewardship. You just look at this space, and you will see a long stretch of mangroves out here, which are the lungs of Mumbai. And the Godrej family, the Godrej Group has actually done a lot to conserve it and maintain it as it is, to ensure that, we really mean what we are saying, in terms of environment. At the same time, when you talk about sustainability, I think there are so many initiatives which are there going on in the company. You could talk about reducing the carbon footprint or, renewable energy sources. There are so many things which actually we are doing. And, one of the things which actually I keep admiring is the kind of drive which comes from Mr. Godrej himself.
Wow.
He is so passionate about, it could be climate change agenda or, he's there, and he actually keeps driving that initiative across. And I have seen that the moment it's driven, an initiative is driven from the top, it does, get a lot of momentum and a lot of focus, a lot of seriousness. And plus, to add to that, you can look at the kind of work which we are doing. We have a hospital of our own. We have 2 schools. And there's a lot of philanthropy work which the group keeps on doing.
Right.
So, I could keep rattling off, the kind of work which we are doing in this particular domain. But that's something which also, I think, probably is something which is so close to my heart. Given these kind of values, which I just spoke about, I think that's one primary reason I would say that, this company is so dear to me, and, I have actually immersed myself, in the organization, and I'm being here for the past more than 2 decades. And it's so lovely to, be a part of this group. It's really a wonderful experience.
Wonderful. And I think, Pushkar, you're an amazing brand ambassador for Godrej Boyce, the whole group in general, and of course for GSS in particular. I sense, I see, I feel the passion that you have. I get a very reassuring whiff of your sense of purpose that drives you. And what you are contributing to society and the nation through GSS is very, very important.
So Pavan, let me tell you one more thing when I talk about the values and how we look at the purpose, at Godrej. So we look at it from the lens of 3 P's. So it's about people, it's about planet, and of course profit. So so these are the 3 P's which are very, very important, and the entire purpose is built onto these 3 pillars.
Wonderful. In fact, a lot of entities say yes, people, planet, and profit. But I could be wrong, or perhaps it is just my subconscious favoring Godrej because I've respected the company and the brand name for so many decades of my life. But I feel that while other companies might say yes, we want profit, and they will take profit from the planet, from areas which are not very, very good. But I don't think Godrej has gone into any area of business which has forced it to sort of degrade the planet for profit and then say, oh, we make profit and now we're going to put it back to helping the planet. So I don't know how true that is. It's just a feeling I have.
True, Pavan. You said it, I must say.
And all these 3 P's equal to the big thing that drives Godrej, which is the other 4th P of purpose. And, with all due respect to the wonderful things you said about the Godrej Group and, the 3 P's and the 4th of purpose. Pushkar, I have enjoyed this conversation. I think there was a lot of learning. There were a lot of insights for me. And I'm sure that the listeners also will agree. What did you think of our chat so far?
So let me tell you, one of the things which I like about, these podcasts and, especially, when you have someone so professional and, having such a great amount of experience, one of the things which comes out is the kind of probing which you do, and which actually forces you to think and also, come out with what you are and what you feel and reach out to, people and talk about the real you, who you are. So Pavan, it's really exciting to be on the Master's Voice on Mediabrief.com, and so happy with the kind of work which you're doing, and I must compliment you for that. So Pavan, all the very best for the kind of work which you're doing. Keep doing that. Great.
Thank you very much indeed, Pushkar. You've been very kind, and thanks for the kind words about Mediabrief.com and MVP, the Master's Voice podcast, and for being such a gracious host. Thanks again also to Brinda Mehta of Ad Factors PR and to Yashodhara, the wonderful smiling Yashodhara from your Copcom team. Thank you very much indeed. Rahila too, who's right here. Thank you, Rahila. So thank you everybody for making this episode possible.
Pleasure.
Pushkar Gokhale, Business Head, Godrej Security Solutions, was my distinguished guest on this episode of MVP, the Master's Voice podcast on Mediabrief.com. I hope you enjoyed and found this episode full of insights. I did. Till we meet again in the next episode, this is your host and friend Pavan Chawla saying, take care, stay safe, stay secure. Bye-bye.